This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. There's nothing sweeter than baking cookies during the holidays. With Prime, I get all my ingredients delivered right to my door, fast and free, no last-minute store trips needed. And of course, I blast my favorite holiday playlist on Amazon Music. It's the ultimate soundtrack for creating unforgettable memories. From streaming to shopping, it's on Prime. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into.
Whether you're ordering wings for the game, whipping up a 7-layer dip, or ordering pizza, there's something about football that makes you want to eat. And this football season, Uber Eats has the best deals on game day food. No matter what you're craving, from 2-for-1 pizza to buy one, get one wings, Uber Eats will be dropping new deals each week, all season long. Uber Eats, official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Terms and conditions apply. See app for details.
70,000 people are here, and Bob Dylan is the reason for it.
Inspired by the true story.
For anyone who's gonna hold your attention on a stage, you have to kind of be a freak.
Are you a freak?
Hope so.
And starring Timothée Chalamet as Bob Dylan. He defied everyone.
Turn it down!
Play loud!
To change everything.
Make some noise, BD.
Timothée Chalamet, Edward Norton, Elle Fanning, Monica Barbaro. A complete unknown. Only in theaters Christmas Day. Rated R. Under 17, not admitted without parent.
Did you know Nationwide is so much more than a great insurance company? They're one of America's largest financial services companies. Like how I'm more than just quarterback Peyton Manning, I'm also meditating Manning. For your insurance and financial needs, Nationwide is on your side.
Nationwide Investment Services Corporation, member FINRA, Columbus, Ohio.
Hey everybody, it's Weird Islanders, the podcast, back once again. My name is Dan. That is Mike. How are you this evening, Mike?
Jacked up. This is going to be one that is going to be hard for me to contain myself for. Yeah. This season's been great because of the list of players that have trickled across the window and into the show have been some of my all-stars. And this player is no different. And iconic player, an iconic performance at an iconic venue with an iconic stick. One of the things I love about this player is his stick. But I love everything about this player and his brief 1-year tenure with the Islanders. It's, like a good show in like the new age in streaming. Sometimes you can get a show that's just what do they call it? A mini run or whatever the hell it is. Like a 10 episode, 1 season show. And at the end of it, you're thinking, damn, it was so good. And I kind of wish we had more, but at the same time, you're like, it was so almost flawless and perfect and hit all the right notes that maybe a second season would just disappoint. And that's how I feel about this player, because he came for 1 year, won over my heart, did some hilarious shit. And then he, and I mean this with all due respect, but he fucked off. Like he was out the door quick. And given who he is, the age of the NHL, it was the makeup of that team. It was such an appropriate tenure for this player with the Islanders. Fit like a glove, but you could tell like if he stayed one more year, it might not have felt that way, especially with the way the team was going that next year. So. I just have a big smile on my face every time I think about this guy, and he seemed to always have a smile on his face when he was playing. So I'm really excited to talk about our man today.
Yeah, this is a player, and I think him and the team both got what they wanted out of that 1 year, and then they moved on to other things. And yeah, I'm excited to talk about this guy too. And we're going to spend most of our time talking about a single game, but we've got a lot to get to before that. And to do that, we're going to bring on our great guest. You know him from Lighthouse Hockey, and because he's been on this show before, he's our friend Steve Smith. Steve, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on again, guys. Happy to
It's
be
great
back.
to have you on again. It's great to talk to you again. The last time we had you on, we talked about another immortal Islanders import, Val Filppula, who I'm sure you will be delighted to find out is still playing. He's still playing in a lower tier Finnish league, and he's been playing. He was playing the last 3 seasons in the Swiss league, and his numbers are pretty friggin' good over there. Are you keeping up with the sort of adventures of Val Filppula as he continues to play well into his old age in his homeland?
No, honestly, I have to be. My episode of Weird Islanders is probably the last time I thought very hard and seriously about Val Filppula, especially as an Islander, but generally at all.
I'm sure he's still handsome as ever too.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think I'm actually on Hockey DB right now, and it says that he actually leads the Mestis League in Finland in handsome. So that's an actual. I just found that out before. I was like, wait, who did Steve do last time? I was like, all right, it was Filppula. That's fun. I was like, what's he doing? I thought he was still playing in the NHL, but it turns out he's not. But he is in fact playing over in Europe. So good for him. I hope he continues. We are here though to talk about a guy who preceded Val Filppula by many years, of course. And again, a guy who, much like Val Filppula, showed up for 1 year, played lights out, made a ton of fans on the island, and then just, waved his hands and rode into the sunset like a hero. And so I guess you have a type, Steve. And so will you please reveal, Steve Smith, will you please reveal the subject of tonight's episode of Weird Islanders, the podcast?
Tonight's episode of Weird Islanders is about Viktor Kozlov, clocking in at 6'4" or 6'5", depending on the source, and 230 pounds.
He was a big boy.
Yes.
The big boy, big center, and he had a big game at a big arena that we're going to talk about in a minute. But first, remember that we are on Patreon, patreon.com/IslandersAnxiety. Membership gets you ad-free episodes, bonus podcasts, written posts, and a whole lot more. Or you can sign up for free to get our weekly release calendar and announcements. So sign up either way you can, patreon.com/IslandersAnxiety. Okay, Steve. So you had actually put dibs on Kozlov way back when we did the Filppula episode. You were like, oh, I kind of want to do Kozlov too. And we ended up on selling on Filppula. So what is it about, I think I know the answer to this question, but what is it about Viktor Kozlov that still fascinates you all these years after he played for the Islanders?
Well, we've teased it several times, but the main reason, not to get too far ahead, is his 4-goal game against the Rangers. Yeah. He's also just like the classic hockey name from like that time when I was a kid. Yeah. I remember him. He was on NHL 99 for PC. He was playing with Pavel Bure on the Panthers.
Yep.
It was very strange that he was an Islander, to be honest with you, but he had a good year. He had a really good year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up his name because that's the first thing that jumped when the Islanders signed him. I was like, I remember him from his Panthers day. I was like, this guy is really good. Plus, his last name is Kozlov. And I feel like in that time, there was like 20 Kozlovs skating around the NHL, and they all would just score against the Islanders anytime the Islanders played a Kozlov.
Yeah. Not to be confused with Slava Kozlov, who played for the Red Wings
Slava.
all those years. Yeah.
But I guess there were I think there were only 2, but it felt like there were so many more.
Right.
And this was the era of I feel like this late 90s, early 2000s was really a great era for Russian hockey as
definitely
almost like a side entertainment product if you were an NHL fan, because these guys were full of personality. Nobody really knew if they were going to show up game to game, night to night. This is where the cliche, like the enigmatic Russian, came to be. Obviously, the Islanders had one of their own in Yashin. They had actually 2 of their own because they also had perhaps the most enigmatic Russian of them all in Oleg Kovasha. But like there was just like this cohort of guys that on some nights you watched, whether it be Viktor Kozlov or Yashin or a bunch of the other Russians in this era. You're like, that is not only the best hockey player I've ever seen, but that is the best person I've ever seen at their skill, at their craft I've ever seen. Like they were like just unplayably good once every 3 weeks, and then they would disappear for a couple weeks, and then they'd show up again and be good. And you're like, why can't you just bottle it up? And that seemed to just be like the whole conundrum with these players for so long. And that reputation like stuck with them for so long. And it really took, I guess, Alex Ovechkin to kind of like just like get rid of it almost. Like, no, we're not just all like these guys who have flash in the pan games and go away. And you look up at the end of the year, you're like, yeah, he had a respectable season with like 60 points, but he probably drove me crazy half the games that he played for my team. Whereas like Ovechkin obviously was much more consistent, but these guys were just so much fun to watch on a nightly basis because you just didn't know who was going to show up. And Kozlov's hallmark moment, there's another moment too that shouldn't be overlooked that I'm sure we'll talk about at the end. But Kozlov's hallmark moment is in Islanders is such a perfect example of that because that game against the Rangers, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, I remember just watching him just being like, holy shit, like this is like watching Lionel Messi or Pele right now. Like this guy is just so good tonight. And the puck is finding him, and anytime he touches it, it's the Islanders are scoring. So this guy came to the island as advertised, left the island as advertised. I couldn't like this player more.
Yeah, he was an interesting guy. I remember him before he even came to the Islanders and playing for San Jose and, like you said, Florida. I do not remember his Devils tenure at all. Well, I guess we'll get to that in a minute. But, I remember him. You're right. This was a great time for these Russian players that all seemed to have just otherworldly skill. And the Islanders were very, very rarely the recipient of that skill. Normally they were the victim of it, as you just mentioned. Like Slava Kozlov always seemed to score against them. And, I remember when Pavel Bure got traded to the Panthers shortly after Viktor Kozlov did. Guess who scored 2 goals in his first game as a Panther against the Islanders? Pavel Bure, So like it was always sort of that sort of thing happening. But, Kozlov came in very highly touted, huge guy, like Steve said before, played for the Sharks and was kind of a disappointment. He didn't really pan out the way they thought. The Sharks were not particularly good at that point, but he had a 41-point season in 96-97. I forgot to mention he was drafted in first round 6th overall in 93. So a couple of years later, he acclimates to America, has a 16-goal, 41-point season. Not too bad, but again, the Sharks, they're not good. He's not really working out. He's not the centerpiece that they think he is. And so they trade him to Florida with a 5th round pick, which turned into Yaroslav Spacek, another guy who hung around all the time, in a swap that I'm not even sure I understand this, somehow ended up with the Lightning getting the 1st overall pick and taking Vinny Lecavalier.
This is another thing that happened, I feel like, in the 90s where like these trades would happen. And I'm like, I don't think this is how it's supposed to work. Like you're giving up something. You're supposed to get something back. Like it's the NHL was so different back then. The bookkeeping was just ridiculous.
It was wild. It was
almost like NBA trades. And like, the funniest part too is like Kozlov, that's not the first time that he was traded for a top pick. Like he was San Jose had decided they wanted to pick him over anybody else in the 93 draft. And like, they were like, oh, we could probably get him if we trade down. We don't need to pick him 2nd overall. So they traded that pick to Hartford and they got Chris Pronger, who turned out to be pretty good. But the funny, like I have a small connection to that in a sense. So one of the players that San Jose got back with Kozlov was Sergei Makarov. Who he was like the one of the first guys to come over from Russia, won the Calder Trophy as a 31-year-old.
They changed the rules because of him.
Yeah, exactly. I went to college with his son. He was actually my next door neighbor freshman year, and so
wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, that I know it was wild, and I didn't even realize that Makarov was part of that trade. So I went to this was the year. It was the 13-14 season. And so I'm still trying to like make friends in the beginning of the year. Like obviously got some friends, but like still don't really have anyone to talk hockey with. And so the Molson Vanek trade goes down that October and I have no one to go talk to about it. So I like knock on his door. I go talk to him about it. And yeah, it was cool.
That's amazing.
That is hilarious.
That's really wild. I mean, did you ever meet Sergei Makarov?
No, and actually, I really didn't keep in touch with that much either. But it was really cool. I wish I did get to meet him. It would have been fun.
Yeah, that is really cool.
Yeah,
and they did.
Grew up a Sharks fan.
That's amazing. And they did change the rules because this dude was 30 years old. He came over from Russia and he won the Calder. And they were like, yeah, that's not really what this Calder, what this trophy is supposed to be.
Yeah.
And they changed it. He had like a Jofa helmet too. I remember him playing there.
Yeah, and he fizzled out with the Sharks too.
Yeah, he didn't do much with the show. He won that with Calgary, and then by the time he got to San Jose, he was kind of out of gas. But yeah, finding out that his trade to San Jose, or his acquisition by San Jose, the drafting of Viktor Kozlov, somehow ended up with the Hartford Whalers ending up with Chris Pronger, and then his trade from San Jose ended up with the Lightning taking Vinny Lecavalier. I was like, what the hell? What is this guy? He's just like somehow Hall of Famers are just passing through Viktor Kozlov somehow. I mean, Cavalier's not there yet, but he probably will be. But that was pretty wild. But regardless of what happened with the Lightning across the state, Florida was where Kozlov started to make his inroads into being what he would become. He played the most games he ever played with a team was with Florida, 414. He scored 100 goals for them, had 190 assists. I'm going to guess most of those went to Mr. Bure. And he had a career-high 70-point season in 1999-2000, played full 80 games, 17 goals, 53 assists. Again, I'm sure most of those assists ended up on the stick of Pavel Bure. And that's when sort of the legend of Viktor Kozlov started to grow. It's like, okay, wow, 70 points. This guy's finally coming into his own. He's finally starting to deliver on some of that promise. Again, he's a huge guy. We cannot forget that. He's an enormous human being playing center. He has seemingly all the tools, and that's the first time he sort of managed to put it together. So, I mean, Steve, do you remember him from playing in this era? I mean, he played a lot of games for the Panthers. The Islanders were absolutely terrible at this point, especially 99, 2000. Obviously, they'd be better a couple years later. But, like, I remember him playing against the Islanders and being like, damn, that guy's really good. Like, he looked like an all-star every time he played them. I mean, do you have any recollection of that at all with Kozlov?
Pretty like vague. Like, I remember, like you said, him scoring on us or him setting up Bure to score on us. The Islanders were mostly not good when he was on the Panthers, so they would usually lose those games, and it was a lot of fun to just kind of revisit that.
Yeah, no, it was a long time ago. And if you had blocked out those memories of those terrible teams, I don't blame you at all. Mike, what about you? I mean, this is prior to him coming over to the Islanders. Again, if you don't remember him playing for the Devils, I don't blame you because I don't either. But again, with the Panthers, I definitely remember him really being a force, and particularly against a bad team like the Islanders.
Yeah, exactly. I think that kind of sums it up, right? Like he like the Panthers were really bad back then too. For a lot of that. So those games at the Coliseum, I'm sure if you looked up a Panthers Islanders game on like Islanders Pride YouTube channel or Sab's YouTube channel, and you could count the fans on one hand, because that's not going to be a fan base that traveled to the games for like a road game like a lot of folks did back then. But one thing I do remember about Kozlov with the Devils is that when the Islanders had signed him, I should say, like that offseason, they signed him late in the summer, I believe, right? Like he came in pretty late when the Islanders, like almost during training camp. And I just remember reading the story and being like, wow, Viktor Kozlov was still a free agent. Where like I just was shocked that like this guy was still kind of floating around him. And this is, I think, what one of the kind of moves, this was that crazy summer, obviously, with the Neil Smith moving on and coming in 40 and then 40 days later moving on, and Gar Snow coming taking over. That this move was kind of like a precursor of what Snow's bread and butter was, which was finding bargain bin guys, signing them to cheap deals, whether late in the summer for PTO, getting them off waivers during training camp, etc. And then them hitting for that one season. And it was, like you said, Dan, a situation where it worked out like gangbusters for both parties. But I remember when they signed him being confused that he was still out there and just being like, wait a minute, he was with the Devils? Like, I thought, and just like he spent last season with the New Jersey Devils, where he scored whatever, like 25 points in 69 games. And thinking, okay, that doesn't make sense to me that he was still out there. It also doesn't make sense that was his point total. He must have been hurt or something. And then not that kind of just like the whole the circumstance of it all, him being a late summer flyer, the Devils, no one really getting all that excited despite it being Viktor Kozlov coming to the Islanders. It all kind of tempered my expectations, which I think ends up being a good thing because he bang for your buck he might be the best like Islander free agent signing during the entire Snow era when you consider like what they spent on him, the expectations coming in, and the moments he provided.
Yeah, that might be true. That's a good question. I didn't even think about that. I mean,
Yeah,
we know about,
for less than $1 million, right?
Yeah.
That's
crazy.
And he wasn't Andrew Ladd, so I mean that right there was a good sign that he did pretty well for himself. But I didn't realize that until I put this together. That he signed really late with them. It was September 13th. One last thing about his Devils tenure. So he was traded by the Panthers to the Devils. He played 11 games at the end of one season and then a full season afterwards, which again I have no recollection of whatsoever. But he was traded for Christian Berglund and Viktor Uchevtov. And I thought Berglund had been traded. I thought he was part of the Kovalchuk deal. I might be wrong about that, but for some reason that name sticks out to me. But in any event,
I think that was Nicholas Bergfors.
Oh,
yeah, because I always thought the same thing, and I was like, wait, how did Nicholas? I remember him being like a little bit of a bust.
Yeah.
And before we move on from the trade, sorry, I just did want to mention about Yaros.
I got my Bergs mixed up.
Yeah, you got your Bergs mixed up.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say one thing about Yaros Spacek. That guy was absolutely a former future Islander for me. Like I thought he was going to be an Islander no less than 10 times during his career. I was like, that's the type of guy they need. Bring him in, 1-year deal, let him run the power play. We can flip him at the deadline because we're going to suck. But he just never did. He was, obviously spent plenty of time with Buffalo and Montreal and did the tour, but he never landed on the island, which I was kind of surprised with. And now I think his son is kicking around like in the minors.
Is he really? Oh wow!
I believe Yaros, or he just got drafted. So yeah, Yaros Spacek. I really always thought you were going to be a subject of this show, but never happened. I remember he was on that Oilers team, I believe that 05-06 team that almost felt like an Islander team because of how many players were on it. Yeah, his son was a 5th round pick of the Minnesota Wild in 2022.
So his son has a chance to be a weird Islander then. There you go.
Yes.
Yaros Spacek will always be maybe the quintessential Buffalo Buffa Slug player to me. Definitely part of that era. But
Maxim Afinogenov.
Yes, another guy. Yes. Well, I think of him as in the Black Sabres jersey, but definitely in that Buffa Slug era.
Oh yeah, I'm mixing up. You're right. I'm mixing up the Buffalo and the Buffa Slug.
That's right. But yeah. So a very interesting little. I didn't think we would come across all of this these little fun facts during a Viktor Kozlov episode. But we're getting there to the big main event in a few minutes. But so. As I mentioned before, September 13th, 2006, the Islanders signed Viktor Kozlov. On the same day, they signed Richard Park and Mike Dunham, who were two guys who will also be kind of superstars in a way, a little bit. Neither one of them. Well, Dunham could be a weird Islander at some point. Park, way too many games. I have no recollection of them signing him necessarily. I think I might have just come across, and I definitely didn't really think that he was kind of like the right fit or anything. I think he was just sort of there. I don't remember like making a big deal about the sign. Steve, do you remember the signing at all and him showing up, or was he just? I just remember him like being on the roster all of a sudden and being like, "Wait, when the hell did I get him?"
I remember only because, like you said, it was like right before training camp, so like starting to get back into following the Islanders again after the summer. And same thing, I was just sort of like, "Wait, why is Viktor Kozlov signing with the Islanders? Like, why is Viktor Kozlov not signed by any team right now?"
Yeah, right.
And I think you noted this as well, like in the Google Doc, but it was the day after.
Yes.
The day after signing Rick DiPietro. So the Islanders were in the news.
Yeah, I think I was still in a bit of a fog after that DiPietro signing, because that I remember. I was working at the AP at the time and was just like, they did what? Like, why? And then trying to rationalize, like, we've been over this with Rick a million times, but like trying to be like, okay, listen, if he stays healthy, then they have a starting goalie making only like $4.5 million. That's a great deal. Mm-hmm. And I feel, after all these years, I probably jinxed the poor guy. But I think at that point I just sort of blacked out for a little while and was just sort of like trying to was so focused in my brain on trying to rationalize why you would sign a goalie to a 15-year contract. And then I think it was at the time we already knew that they tried to sign him to like a 17-year contract, and the league or the Players Association was like, yeah, that's not going to fly. So I just kind of missed out on, but I feel like I remember them signing Park and Dunham. So I don't know why Kozlov doesn't register for me, but Mike, do you remember what, the signing of Kozlov and bringing him in?
So I remember, and I remember thinking, holy shit, like this is crazy. They got Viktor Kozlov, like this. We say it all the time about this team. This was the mercenary team of all mercenary teams. It's hard to put like in like a broader fan put into context just how many players on this team were just passing through. Like it was basically a team of guys who were just like stopping off at a rest stop on like I-95 as their road trip continued, and obviously Kozlov was one of them. And that day, I remember them sign in a weird. First of all, crazy that those three were signed on the same day because some sliding doors end up happening at the end of the season with the three of them that all add up to one of the most iconic moments in Islander history. But I remember of the three of them being the most emotional about Dunham because I was like, wow, like that's the type of backup they need. Obviously, Snow's not there anymore.
Yeah,
they needed kind of someone to keep the reins on Rick, so to speak. That I thought he was perfect. I remember Ranger fans being kind of like, man, like you guys signed Mike Dunham. I remember when he was like the next big thing for us and feeling pretty good about that. And he was just terrible for the Islanders that whole season. He was terrible. The Islanders had a few former Rangers on that team actually, and a lot of them ended up being were of that ilk, like guys that the Rangers were really high on as youngsters, and they never mounted to anything in New York, right? They had Dunham. They ended up with Mike York for a little while that season, or that was his second season with the team. And of course they had Chris Simon as well. So and Tom Poti. There were a few former Rangers there, and so when they brought in this trio, it also drove home the fact to me that like, okay, this is the identity of the team. The identity of this team is that, like I just said, we're just passing through. And I was like, we just need to get as much as we can out of these guys who have been around the league for so long, and they're pros, and just hope that it works out. Because you go down the list of these guys, let's call them like the transient Islanders or something. Mike Sillinger was 35, but like he and I'm not counting Shatan. He had signed, like he's a different story. Shatan to me was like an all-star, not in the same group. But like Sillinger, 35-year-old guy, total pro. You knew what to expect out of him. Kozlov, obviously, we'll be talking about a lot, but he's 31 at the time. Then you have Poti, who's 29. Chris Simon, mid-30s. Sean Hill, mid-30s. Richard Park was at 30. It's you go like Brendan Witt, 31 years old, and they had Zhitnik and York at the beginning of the season before they traded them. They were both on either side of 30. Like York was 29, Zhitnik in the mid-30s. So they had this crazy team of Dunham as well. Like they had this crazy team of guys who've just they're just guys. They're almost like the essence of this show, right? We're just talking about a few of NHL players, and the Islanders were just going to be like, all right, let's try to make this work. Like we know that these guys should at least not screw things up, and whether or not they can have recapture some elixir of their youth is what's going to determine how far we can go. There was clearly a really low ceiling on this team when you look at the roster, but there also was a pretty high floor because of the names that we talk about, right? This roster was never going to be just downright terrible because these guys were all pros. Like they were all pros. They all come to Long Island. They had that's the other funny thing about them, like no attachment here at all. And then they just end up here for most of them for a very short time. And they put together this season that we'll now get to talk about, that we've talked about it a lot, of course, on the show, but we now get to really deep dive into, I guess, two of the best moments from this year. Because it was heaps of fun. It was a confusing season as well. It was very visceral. Like there was like I feel like this season was this a lot of like colors and stuff they were wearing their orange jerseys a lot this season too. So maybe that's why I feel like that orange jersey like really kind of clouds the lens of this thing. But it felt like that. It felt like a very colorful alien season that happened on Long Island that nobody else paid any lick of attention to because why would you? Why would you?
Well, they would start paying attention sometime just around the trade deadline when Garth Snow would make a huge trade. By the way, running out this list of names, I know he wasn't a free agent, but I just want to point out that we're talking about the 06-07 season, and Radek Martinek was 30 years old in the 06-07 season. And we were talking about him in Lighthouse Hockey when? 2013, 14, 15, 16? Wow.
It definitely feels that recent, that's for sure. Maybe
it definitely does.
Like he retired.
I know how it felt like he was 30 years. It felt like he showed up on the Islanders and he was like born 30 years old. I don't know. It was kind of weird. But it's just, I'm looking at these ages. I'm like, that dude was 30 years old when this team was barely out of this era, which is kind of funny. Anyway, Radek. It always comes back to Radek, as we all know.
It always, like he's 30 years old on this team. Like when they traded for Ryan Smith, he was probably like, who is that? Like is that the equipment manager? That guy, the guy who's like that, like kind of like skinny, lanky guy lurking in the corner. Is he just here to like wash my clothes? Like, oh no, that guy's been in the league since 2002.
Is that the guy I give my skates to? Or no. He's starting right behind you tonight, actually. And now a word from our sponsors. First is always VintageIceHockey.com, where you can get t-shirts, hoodies, jerseys, and more featuring over 100 classic hockey logos. Vintage Ice Hockey now carries a full line of Islanders Anxiety merch featuring our blue and orange brain logo, as well as our Al Arbor and the Island shirts. And as always, our portion of the sales go directly to the Center for Dementia Research. That is VintageIceHockey.com. Try wines from the Pinot Project. They offer a Rosé, a Pinot Grigio, and a Pinot Noir that was named a Top 100 Best Buy by Wine Enthusiast magazine. All are delicious, priced at less than $15 a bottle, and available at local wine shops and at UBS Arena. Learn more at thepinotproject.com. Please drink responsibly. So Kozlov comes into this, again, right around training camp, and fits like a glove. And I got to tell you, and we're going to get to the game in a minute, but like 25 goals, 26 assists, 51 points for a guy who, ultimately would only stay for the one season. That's pretty darn good. And I mean, this is a team that hung around and, tried to kind of like, they never got too far out of things, which is pretty interesting. And like they kept it, like you said, it was a veteran team. They never got too far out of the playoff chase. So when they made that Smith move, it was, they were still very much well within it, although they were out of it and then had to make it the last day of the season, obviously. But this was a pretty good season for anybody, really. And especially a guy like Kozlov to show up and like just pot 25 goals is pretty wild. Like, the Islanders can barely sign. If let's put it this way, Anthony Duclair is their big, free agent signing this year. I guess Siplikov is as well. But like, if either of those two guys show up and score 25 goals, that's fantastic. We're like, holy crap, we're like throwing parties. This guy just showed up, and before, like, he showed up at the week of camp started basically, and ends up with 25 goals. The end of the team does. It's pretty wild. Of course, he had 4 in one game, but he put together a pretty good, run of games and played really, really well. I mean, does anything stand out from you guys prior to that game that we're going to talk about in a minute, the Rangers game, which happened in December? I mean, but before that point, he had, I don't know how many goals, but like, I mean, he must've had, I don't know, 10, 12 goals already at that point. And again, I just remember him being like, wow, this guy's really, really good. Yeah. 2, 4, 6, 8. Yeah. He had 9 goals before that outburst. So again, that's pretty good. Do you guys have any sort of memories of him playing prior to that? I mean, he had a 2-goal game against Phoenix to open the season. He had goals against Chicago and the Devils. But anything stick out to you from back then?
Just more so, like you said, it was like a good year for him. It was actually his career high in goals too, which is pretty wild.
That's
25, and
wild.
like
It is.
25 goals back
Yeah.
then too. It's huge. Like
Right.
now it's it's impressive, but it's not like star level talent. But back then, that was a lot of goals. And I remember too, like Mike was saying earlier, just sort of like the classic enigmatic Russian, just like he was he was like he would be inconsistent. He would have games where you notice him all the time, and then he like I forget he was on the team sometimes.
Yeah. That is
And
true.
then
Yeah.
he like you know he I think he only had he had 9 goals or whatever, but like I think prior to what was that? So on December 1st he had like 6, and then on December 4th he had 12, right, or something like that.
Yeah, well, he had the game,
Yeah.
on the third, but yeah, I'm with you. I remember him being like a little bit invisible too, and I can definitely remember thinking to myself, how was a guy that big go invisible for so long? Like how is that possible? But yeah, no, this team was pretty good. He had a little bit of chemistry with Chris Simon. I see he's on a line with. He played around. He played on a lot of different lines. He was with Yashin apparently. Blake a little bit, again, Yashin again. So they were all over the place.
I remember that road trip to start that season too. I don't know if they do it as much anymore, but the Islanders used to get their either like the Southwest trip or West Coast trip, and this was back in the time of an imbalanced schedule when you didn't play each team twice. I believe so. They used to be the home opener team for a lot of other teams because the NHL is a gate-driven league, Elliot, and you want to make sure that like you're not wasting the big, like the Canadians or the Leafs or the Rangers or the Bruins opening up a lot of buildings for a season, because that's home openers just naturally are a big draw anyway. So the Islanders would always be a team like, oh well, look, if we put the Islanders in San Jose in the middle of February, no one's going to show up. But if we do it on a home opener, that's a good gate for an Islander Sharks game. So they did that a lot, and I remember this opening road trip. And the first game against Phoenix, they got their shit kicked in. Miro Shatan scored like a minute into. I've watched this game on YouTube back, or like highlights from it, highlights from this October, and be like, I remember this game so vividly because Miro scored right away, and I was like, wow, like okay, this is good, off to a good start. Got to take care of the Coyotes, and then the Coyotes scored in like that, like it was 5-1 in the blink of an eye, and then Kozlov ended up scoring his first 2 as an Islander, and then they go to San Jose, and this was kind of when the Sharks were starting to get better or decent, and they didn't score, and I'm like, oh god, maybe this is going to be a terrible season, and then they lost to the I think the Kings or the Ducks. They lost the Kings. They lost the next game to the Kings as well. Another game where they blew an early lead. Old Islander Brent Sopel scored against them in the game-winning goal. The guy that they had traded from the previous season. And so the Islanders are 0-3 heading into Anaheim, the year that they go to the Stanley Cup and win it. And they were undefeated at the time, I believe. And the Islanders won a crazy game in the third period when Alexei Yashin scored really late to break it up. And I remember thinking that and we joke about this all the time, like must-win game, basically 82 must-win games every season. But I remember staying up late for that Anaheim game, watching it on Fox Sports with Howie and Billy, and being like, I am living and dying with this game against the Ducks. It was fucking crazy too. It was back and forth. Islanders were down, then they were up. They blew the lead. Can you believe that? And then ended up getting the win and coming back home. Mike Dunham was in goal that night too. It was just, it was a crazy way to start the season. 1-3 on the West Coast. And finally they came back home and ended up kind of putting things together on a little bit of a point streak. But I like that West Coast trip is when we talk about the West Coast trips of yore. on Islanders anxiety. This one is the one that jumps out to me. Like it's the thing that I always go to because it scared the shit out of me. This one, 4 games into the season, I'm like, I'm gonna have to write off they obviously didn't make the playoffs the season before. I'm gonna have to write off another season by Columbus Day. This is gonna suck. And but they ended up getting that win in Anaheim and putting things together. And like we were saying, Kozlov ends up playing a huge part in this very, very creepily well balanced offense. If you look back at this team, like they were getting production from everyone. As I said, like they basically put this team together saying, all right, like let's just hope for the best from everybody. They almost got the best from everybody. I don't want to go look it up right now, but Sillinger scored 26. I'm gonna say that's his career high or close to it. Kozlov obviously career high with 25. Blake, that was his 40-goal season. Shatan scored 27. So you had 4 25-plus goal scorers, and they were Jason Blake, Miroslav Shatan, Mike Sillinger, and Viktor Kozlov. I think out of those 4, one of them you'd be like, that makes sense. Like I can't believe the names here, but so then they end up kind of putting, I wouldn't say putting things together, but just like scrapping around. Obviously this team took a while to come together too, because Ted Nolan, new coach, a bunch of players who had probably just met when they went to Moncton for training camp. And so it took a little while for them to get their legs under them. And now, here they come, and it all kind of crescendos for Kozlov, at least in December.
Definitely. One final quick fact about that Coyotes game that opened the season. The Islanders lost 6-3. Steven Reinprecht, who you may remember from the Rob Blake trade to the Avalanche, he had 5 points in that game against the Islanders. 5 points in the opening game of the season. He had 4 assists and a goal. His point total that season, 33. He had 33 points all season. So basically 1/5 of his point total for the entire season happened in that one game against the Islanders, which is absolutely uproariously funny. But anyway,
I do not remember that guy at all.
I do, because of that trade. This was after that trade.
But he was a bald guy. I remember him being a bald guy.
But I can't get over. That's insane. Okay. Anyway, we have teased it enough. We are now 40 odd minutes or so into this episode, and we can finally get to the main event. And that is Viktor Kozlov's massive, incredible, legendary 4-goal game at Madison Square Garden on December 3rd, 2006. The Islanders walk into the Garden and they win a game 7-4. He was not the only player to have a hat trick in that game, but he was the only player to have 4 goals.
In just a moment, they'll drop the puck at the world's most famous arena. Islanders Rangers on MSG next. The Islander ice, back it comes to Kozlov. Kozlov moves in. Cross-ice pass, controlled. Broken up for the moment by Straka, and in! The Islanders have scored their 3rd of the game, and it comes from Viktor Kozlov. The Islanders are scoring with every opportunity they get, but that one, the Rangers gave to them because they had the puck and then gave it up again. Shanahan's goal at 17:28 gets the Rangers within 1. Kozlov along the goal line, being hounded there by Blair Betts. Islanders try to center. It's in on Weeks, and a score! The Islanders! Kozlov, standing on the doorstep, gets one back, and it's 5-3 Islanders.
Yeah, and for the Islanders, just their 5th shot on goal in the period, and Kevin Weeks just couldn't control it.
Richard Park centers, and a goal! Kozlov, and he has a hat trick. Viktor Kozlov answers Shanahan's hat trick with one of his own. Richard Park on the left wing. Centers Kozlov, and he scores again! Viktor Kozlov has 4 goals at the Garden.
Off the rush again. Again, the Islanders haven't had all that many scoring chances. They played last night. They played a somewhat conservative game here in this one where they haven't been a pressure team, and it's been a huge game for Viktor Kozlov.
So, Steve, this is your moment. This is the spot that you remember this guy doing. So talk us through your memories of this particular game. It sounds like it was one that is seared into your memory all these years later. I mean, for all of us too, but I'm, if you remember where you were and everything, let's hear it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was a day game. It was definitely a Sunday. I'm pretty sure it was a Sunday afternoon, and like the Rangers were in their Liberty jerseys. It might have been. Was it on? I don't think it was on national TV. But it feels like it had that kind of vibe to it. But it was. I remember they went up 4-0 in the first period. And Kozlov only had one of those goals.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like he was going off already. He was just it was his third goal in 2 nights because he had scored twice the night before against Pittsburgh, but it was still like he wasn't, on his way to history just yet. And really, it was more so we were all excited about the 4-0 start in the Garden. I think too, maybe I'm misremembering, but it feels like they lost a lot at the Garden a lot back then. I know Yashin also had a 4-goal game against the Rangers at the Garden a few years earlier. So, but like other than that, I don't have too many fond memories of the Islanders playing at the Garden back then. But yeah, after the 4-0 goal, I remember we were going nuts. My brother, who was like 3 at the time, I'm pretty sure my dad and I yelled so loud that he cried. And my mom was definitely scared, I'm sure, as well. But it was exciting. And so in the second period, the Rangers start their pushback. I think they got within 1 goal, right? It was 4-3. And then did Kozlov have the 5th one? And then I think he had the last 3 goals of the game, right?
Right.
So he scored twice. He scored in the second period. It was 5-3, I believe. And then I'm sorry if I'm getting some of these details wrong.
No, you're right. It was 5-3 after 2. Yeah, he had 2 goals at that point. Yeah.
And then he scored in the third. Well, sorry, Brendan Shanahan. Leafs president Brendan Shanahan, who I remember from the Chris Osgood episode, flipped off the crowd at Nassau Coliseum. He had a hat trick, but then Kozlov answered with his own. And so it was now 6-4 when he scored.
Yeah.
And then with like 2 minutes left, they're on their way to winning. And you think, like, if you were just looking at the box score, you see Kozlov scored with like less than 2 minutes left. You might think to yourself, he scored 4 goals, but one of them was an empty netter. No, he beat Weeks cold. Weeks was still in the net. They hadn't pulled him yet, and he got beat very cleanly from Richard Park, I believe, gave him that pass. And so, it was just wild to watch. And for Viktor Kozlov, of all people, to record a 4-goal game, like, I went back and looked the list of Islanders who have scored 4-goal games. It's populated with a bunch of like Islanders legends or fan favorites. Longtime Islanders and Viktor Kozlov. It's Bossy 10 times, which is nuts. Trottier 3 times. Ray Ferraro, Butch Goring, Derek King, Steve Thomas, Alexei Yashin, and Viktor Kozlov. Oh, and
Matt Molson.
And Matt Molson. I think Kyle Poso too, right?
Yes. Against the Oilers, I think. Yeah.
All guys who definitely, spent at least more than one season with the Islanders. But Kozlov stops in for 1 year and drops 4 goals on our most hated rival.
So funny. Yeah.
It was so beautiful.
It was. It's absolutely beautiful.
It's one of my favorite days of being an Islander fan. I actually I remember exactly where I was. I was at a family friend's house. My parents' like best friend, gigantic Ranger fans. This family, like, and I've talked about my mom's friend Teresa on the show before, who is like one of the, she's like the Leo Messi of New York accent trash talk. Like, she's such a good trash talker about the Islanders to me. She's because she's such a sweetheart, and she'll lull me in, and then she'll just hit me with a dagger. And she loves my daughter loves her. She loves my daughter. So I'll be holding Isla at the beach or something, and I'll see Teresa, and she'll come up to me and be like, "Oh, Isla, you look great, Micah. So great to see you. I'm so sorry about the Islanders, like, Luke getting eliminated in 5 games again. That must be really tough. Like, and for like 10 minutes, then I just get berated. It was she's so good at it. I think trash talk is like a dying art in the days of Twitter. it's all about like dunk tweeting on people you've never met before. This was like face to face. She's got a great Brooklyn accent. She's from Bay Ridge, and she or Marine Park, I should say, and she like just lets me have it all the time about the Islanders, and I give it back too when I can. And so there was one time at my sister's rehearsal dinner for her wedding that in front of like the entire time was just ripping on me because the Islanders at that point were just terrible. But anyways, we were at their house, so a hostile environment. Islanders go up 4-0. We're watching the game downstairs, and the Rangers start this comeback. And what did I do? Because I am a thick-skinned Islander fan, I retreated upstairs. I went to someone else's room. I closed the door. I found a small TV, and I watched the rest of this game by myself in a bedroom on a really small TV. I didn't let anyone else come in. There were Ranger fans everywhere, sharks in the water, and I just kept that door. I battened that hatch down, and I just didn't come out until this thing was over. And like I said, like alone in a dark bedroom at someone else's house on a Sunday night, school the next day, and I'm sitting there like the biggest loser in the world, like watching Viktor Kozlov just light it up. There's so many things to dig into about this game. Number one, Kozlov had 4 goals and 4 points. Chris Simon had a goal and 2 assists, so for 3. The two of them played a combined 23 minutes and 2 seconds. Kozlov played 13 minutes and 49 seconds. Simon played under 10 minutes. He also had a fight, I believe, in this game, or he had a fight the night before against Pittsburgh. That's the other thing too, is like they had just won a really big game in Pittsburgh where they lit it up. A game they needed to have. I was expecting, as Steve was saying, back then, like in my head, the Islanders just never won at the Garden. It was like a minor miracle. It felt like a little bit of like going to war and coming out and just being like, all right, more relief than anything else when it was over. The Islanders got a win.
And didn't Yashin like just get hurt at this point too? So it was kind of like, oh shit, I'm going into the Garden without Yashin. Now we're
going into the Garden without Yashin. Lundqvist is starting to like take over the net as a goalie. The Islanders chase him. I think they said like this is like his first real bad performance, whatever. The Islanders got outshot in this game. 43 to 21. Yeah. Like that. Like it, but every time that Ryan Smith, that Viktor Kozlov had the puck on his stick, he scored. And he had an amazing celebration after each goal too. And the fourth one was just the best when he was like, just had this wry smile on his face. With his yellow stick. I loved his yellow stick.
Kevin Weeks made 10 saves on 13 shots, and Lundqvist made 4 saves on 8 shots. And so, they were outshot 43 to 21. Again, Brendan Shanahan had a hat trick in this game.
And that was the whole thing, right? Like when the Rangers started to storm back from this 4-0 lead, and it was Shanahan who I fucking hated at the time already because of that thing that Steve was alluding to with the Red Wings, like him flipping off the crowd. And then he comes to the Rangers, and everyone's making a big deal about how he's like he wants to win a cup with the Rangers. He's already did it with Detroit. He's like doing the tour of like original 6 teams. He doesn't wear shoulder pads. How cool is this guy? And then he's like having his Garden moment, and who ruins it but Viktor Kozlov. It's just like I was so scared that Brendan Shanahan was about to have the moment that Viktor Kozlov had against the Rangers, like he would have it against the Islanders, but it ended up going our way, which so few things did. To that point in our especially me and Steve's time as an Islander fan in our life, because I was 16 in this game, so really hadn't seen much. This was, I guess, at this time, like if you think about it, this was probably like a top 10 game for me in my life. I mean, there's nothing else.
Honestly, not to be like. Not to exaggerate, but it might have obviously even been top 5 because my first year that I was like a really serious fan was 01-02, but I was like 7 or 8 or 6 or 7, something like that, around that age, and I didn't really like appreciate the gravity of it. Like I didn't, I don't even know if I was watching. I was watching the Bates penalty shot, but like I don't remember exactly like how crazy it was and everything like that. So by the time I became like a really like serious fan and like could understand how like important some of these games were, the Islanders didn't have a lot of them. So for Kozlov to drop 4 goals on the Rangers, it was so fun to be able to go to school the next day and it was so much better.
My recollection of this game is much shorter than your guys' story, because I was an adult. This was the year I got married, and so had been married now for 3 months, and my wife and I were living in our townhouse here in Jersey. And I have a good friend named Matt. I've been friends with him since the 7th grade. He's one of my favorite people ever. I talk about Gio all the time. Him, and our friend Andy were kind of the core four of us. And Matt is a Rangers fan. And I let this slide all these years. And because he's one of the good ones, he's not too bad. And we don't do that much trash talking. He's he'll get on me a little bit sometimes, but not really. He's very sympathetic to, the problems the Islanders have and stuff, although he does laugh about it and stuff like that. But this one game, they jumped out to that lead. And I think he said something to me, maybe it was when they started scoring, I think is when he was like, okay, the comeback is on, because when the Islanders go up 4-0 in the first period, that means nothing to me. I'm ready for them to blow it. I tell again, say this to my wife all the time. She's always trying to figure out what the score is. And I'm like, nothing is over until that final whistle happens. So I never initiate the trash talk. So he must've been like, here's the comeback. Now we're starting, especially when Shanahan scored. I'm pretty sure that's how it went. But then when Kozlov scored his second goal to put the Islanders, give him another, to give him that insurance goal back up, to put them up. So they were up 4. It was 4-3, puts them 5-3. I texted him, Victor, like that with the exclamation point. So then Shanahan scores again. And I think he must have said something to me again. But then when Kozlov scored, I texted him again, just Victor again, one more time, I think with 2 exclamation points. And then when he scored that 4th one, it was all capitals, 3 exclamation points, Victor! I was like, oh my, I think even he was like, all right, well played. So that's I almost never trash talk anybody. I'm too smart for that. But that was the one time he and I went back and forth, and it was just me being like, Victor, So anyway, I will always appreciate Viktor Kozlov for doing that. But yeah.
I think this game is why we have this condition, at least me, right? Like, the Islanders go up 4-0 in this game, and 20 minutes later, I'm convinced that they're going to lose it, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's why I like
it's too early to go up that much. Yeah,
way too early to go up that much. And there's when you're rooting for the Islanders or against the teams that the Islanders hate, there's just no lead that feels safe enough. And when a perfect example of this was when the Rangers were down 2-0 with 2 minutes left against the Panthers. And there's a lot of people going nuts on Twitter, like, oh, I'm so happy that this is, it's over. The long nightmare's over. Rangers going to get eliminated. And I'm just sitting there watching, like, what are these people doing? Like, don't they remember when the Rangers almost came back and beat the Islanders on December 3rd, 2006 on Viktor Kozlov night? Like, and then Panarin scored, and I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be insufferable. So yeah, long story short, I really think that this game is what hammered home, not counting chickens for me, even though the Islanders ended up winning the game. This is a game that shoots right to mind when I think about Islander blown leads, and they held on to it, which really gets to the psyche of this fan base.
I mean, they won the game 7-4. So it's like, you look at that and you're like, wow, it's a bloblowout, but it's not.
It was a scare. Let me tell you, there was a time there was the scariest, the most scared I've ever been to be an Islander fan.
The 7-4 win.
It's tough when a game starts as a blowout and then becomes not a blowout.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's when that is when you blow a that's when it's embarrassing. That's the most embarrassing. Like, if they came back and won and I had to go to school the next day.
Oh my God. Yep. And this was just like, as Dan was saying, like the advent of text messaging too. So it's like, also a fun fact about that game that I just came across, but this was one of Eric Boganicki's one of his 11 games as a New York Islander. So he got to see a real fun one from the bench. If Boganicki did 0 goals, 0 assists in 11 games for Boganicki as an Islander.
He'll get an episode of this show. I promise you that. So that game made the Islanders, 14-9-3.
And the Rangers were close. Like, these two teams were they were really close to one another for most of the season.
Yeah.
And sorry to cut you off again, Dan, but like this is another year where everything just broke right for the Rangers. Like, Lundqvist ends up being a franchise goalie, despite I guess that was the season before, but this is when he really started to like become Lundqvist and be a dominant force. And they finish in the 6th spot of the conference that year, like 4 or 5 points ahead of the Islanders. By all means, didn't have like a a great season. Jágr was really good. Michael Nylander and Straka, Nylander, and Jágr kind of like carried them. And they needed Lundqvist to be ridiculous. He played 70 games that year. They finished sixth in the sixth spot, so not a great spot to be in, you would think. No, they're the Rangers. Of course, they finished in the sixth spot. Who do they get in the first round? The Atlanta Thrashers.
Yeah,
and they
right.
sweep them. I think the Thrashers like finished maybe 1 point ahead of them in the season, and that just because of the way the divisions, the Thrashers ended up being in that 3 spot just because
that was
they won the division.
Yeah,
even though they were like 10 points behind everybody else. I think so. It's like they got the cushiest first round matchup. The first time the Thrashers had ever made the playoffs, and the Rangers
only
of course,
time.
the only time the Rangers sweep them. And I'm like, yeah, of course. Like that's exactly what happens to this team, right? They finish 6th, they get the freaking Thrashers.
Yeah, I know. Figures.
Looking for a pickup truck to get just about anything done? Look no further. The Chevy Silverado EV isn't just the most powerful Silverado ever, with next-level towing capability and technology. It also offers game-changing versatility with the available multi-flex midgate and tailgate, which means Silverado EV helps you carry large, bulky, and oddly shaped items up to nearly 11 feet in length. Chevrolet. Together, let's drive. Visit Chevrolet.com to learn more.
So, you want to be a marketer. It's easy. You just have to score a ton of leads and figure out a way to turn them all into customers. Plus, manage a dozen channels, write 1 million blogs, and launch 100 campaigns all at once. When that's done, simply make your socials go viral and bring in record profits. No sweat. Okay, fine. It's a lot of sweat. But with HubSpot's AI-powered marketing tools, launching benchmark-breaking campaigns is easier than ever. Get started at HubSpot.com/marketers.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Upgrade your business with Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning fewer carts going abandoned and more sales going cha-ching. So if you're into growing your business, get a commerce platform that's ready to sell wherever your customers are. Visit Shopify.com to upgrade your selling today.
When a vehicle is certified by Volvo, it's much more than a certified pre-owned. It's certified for that road trip you've been meaning to take. Certified for your growing family. Certified for small steps and big leaps. No matter where the road ahead may take you this season, Volvo hopes you enjoy every moment and are confident in the certified by Volvo vehicle you've trusted to take you there. Contact your Volvo retailer today.
But yeah, they hung around. They were close the whole season. And of course, as we've talked about many times, in fact, specifically on this show, the trade deadline comes around. The Islanders acquire Ryan Smith. They go on to make the playoffs on the last day of the season, thanks to the world's greatest poach check from Wade Dublowitz, we've also talked about on this show. And they go on to lose in 5 games to the Buffalo Sabres. Sorry, I forgot one thing about the legendary game. I mean, Kozlov, to his credit, knew that was a pretty large performance. And like Mike said, that smile on his face, he gave this sort of like, he looked at his friends and he put his arms out in the sort of like almost a closed, are you not entertained thing, just for guys like Richard Park and, the rest of the guys on his team. And afterwards,
Hilbert and Park were the guys that were feeding the puck all night. That's amazing. Hilbert had 2 assists. I think Park had 2 assists. Simon had 3 points. It's just, what a night.
Funny. And Kozlov said after the game, sometimes the puck goes in and sometimes it does not. Yes, very well said, Victor. Very well said. Yes. So that night, the puck went in, let me tell you. And like Steve said, he'd scored 2 goals the night before, so it's 6 goals in like 48 hours. It's pretty wild. I don't know if he was the player of the week, but he probably should have been. But like we said, the Islanders, they make this mad dash to the playoffs with this insane trade that captures the attention of everybody in the hockey world, although absolutely nobody waiting at the airport for Ryan Smith when he gets there. And their season comes to a ignominious end. In a 5-game series loss to.
But one thing I was going to say, I don't know if you were going to bring it up, but that game with the Dublowitz poke check, I was never so confident in somebody scoring a shootout goal than I was Viktor Kozlov.
I didn't know this. Steve mentioned this before. So he scored in that shootout?
Yeah, it was Shatan, then Kozlov, and those 2 guys were just absolute lights out in the shootout.
Now it's Kozlov, who's 4 for 12. Kozlov going wide. Kozlov right, and he scores!
5-hole. Changes the angle just a bit, gets the goaltender moving. Takes it a little wide. Clemenson's got to move a little bit back. Big 5-hole right there. Puts it right by him.
And they both kind of did the same thing as one another, and the same thing every time, which was like they just skated in relative, like at like a kind of leisurely pace, and then just picked the spot and shot it into it. And there was nothing fussy about it at all, really. And after Kozlov, so Shatan went first, I believe. And then Kozlov went. And I remember when after Kozlov went, the stakes of the game being what they were and the situation, after Kozlov scored, he did he like wiped the sweat off his brow celebration because of the pressure. But he did it in a very tongue-in-cheek way, which is basically like, yeah, Viktor Kozlov, he has no idea what the stakes are of this. He probably just found out like the Islanders make the playoffs if they win this game right before the shootout, because he's this enigmatic Russian. You kind of just project your biases on these guys like they don't really care like you do. But he came down. He matter Scott Clemenson in goal, and Shatan and Kozlov score. And like I said, I couldn't have felt less confident that the Islanders were going to win that game, but I was as confident that those two players were going to score than I had been in any player in any situation in my Islander career. I was just like, this is going to come down to whether or not Dublowitz can make one more save than Clemenson, which is hilarious to think about too. Like it was Scott Clemenson versus Wade Dublowitz in this game, but then Ryan Smith was the one who missed it, and then Dublowitz made the poke check. So not only did Kozlov provide a massive game at Madison Square Garden, but he scored what was the game winner for the Islanders in that shootout, and with a really trademark celebration too.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, and it was funny too. So I was watching that clip earlier today in preparation for this episode, because I've watched it several times, but like I didn't notice this. Right before the shootout, Howie and Billy Jaffe are building up how important it is. Dublowitz goes over to the bench. He's talking with everybody. Hey, do you know how these guys shoot? And at one point he gets to Kozlov, who was on the Devils, and he was like asking Kozlov, hey, what do you know about these guys? And he just shook his head and he's like, I don't know.
Thanks, Victor. Thanks a lot. It's pretty funny. Yeah,
it makes me so happy.
It's so funny to remember like the personalities of these guys too, and I think maybe that might have been why that team came together so much, because like they did seem like a fun group. But another guy who we didn't even mention, who we did an episode on, is Marc-Andre Bergeron. So that's another guy with kind of a fun personality too. And like we said, Blake was already there, and kind of that abrasive personality, and Simon too. So I mean, and Rick, obviously one of the bigger personalities we've seen. So I think it was just a bunch of kind of fun dudes who kind of like got together.
And the coaching staff was perfect for them,
of course, yeah, right.
Like Ted and them, and it was it's like this team was kind of one of those situations where maybe you're at like a college friend's bachelor party, or like a sibling's bachelor party or something, where you maybe don't know the whole crew, but it's like everyone's there for the same reason. We're all like on the same page. Let's just have a good time, celebrate. And you realize, oh, these are great guys. Like I'm having a blast, and I may never see them again. Viktor Kozlov and Mike Sillinger, if they passed each other in a hallway, probably wouldn't be like, oh, I played with that guy. But at the same time, they had a great time together, especially the last week of the season. And a large part of it was thanks to Viktor scoring that shootout goal. I think because I remember Shatan being really good during those last 4 games that they needed to win when they needed to go 4-0-0. But I feel like Kozlov, he was really important for them during those games. And maybe I'm wrong, but I'd have to look it up. I just think everyone kind of delivered in those moments until obviously they got gentlemen swept by the Sabres.
Yeah, exactly. And you talk about sort of guys that come in and then have this great season and then go, and that is Kozlov, and that is also Tom Poti, who this would be it for them as Islanders, and both of them signed with the Capitals in 2007 in that summer, and that team wasn't going to last long. Obviously the next season, 07-08, they bottomed out for the most part, or started to at least the bottoming out process, which obviously resulted in pick, the first overall pick in 2009, in which they did not take Victor Hedman. We don't need to get into it, but that started that process. They had that one more sort of mercenary season, and that was it. But I do remember him playing for Washington, and one of my favorite little sort of fun factoids here is here. Do you guys know? So this was obviously the Ovechkin era, because Ovechkin showed up in like 2005, but he wasn't the captain yet. Do you know who the captain of the Capitals was when Viktor Kozlov played his 2 seasons for them?
Ooh.
This guy
is still there.
Bondro, I think, was there, but he was not. Or maybe he wasn't there, but it was not Peter Bondro. Okay. I love Peter Bondro. It was not him.
Oh my God, let me think.
This is not a guy you remember. I assure you that.
It's not someone we remember. Oh, was it Chris Clark?
It was Chris Clark. Very good.
Oh man,
Chris Clark, a very innocuous captain.
Yes.
I guess it was a fine pick before you have Alex Ovechkin.
Right.
Yeah. So there you go. Friends. You can amaze your friends at parties with the knowledge that Chris Clark was the previous cap. Just like I'm always like, who was the captain of the Rangers before Mark Messier? And if people remember Kelly Kizio, you're like, okay, man, you're okay. That's pretty wild. Anyway,
and I was completely talking out of school when I said that Kozlov was really good down the stretch. I know Shatan and Smith were good. Viktor Kozlov, maybe I'm thinking I was very frustrated with him towards the end of the season because he didn't really seem to have he scored on at the end of March, and that was really it. He didn't score at all in April. So his 25 goals ended in March 31st. So I was wrong there. I'm giving Viktor Kozlov a lot of credit today, so I just want to make sure I don't go too overboard by making up stuff. But
it's all right. He earned it. I mean, he saved it all for the for the shootout goal, obviously.
Yeah, exactly.
So
he was a hero that season.
Oh, definitely,
he really
was. He was. So I mean, just real quick to tie this up again, I remember him playing for the Capitals because this was sort of like when the Capitals were kind of gathering all the Russians. They had the big Russian guy. They were trying to, they would have Fedorov at this point. They would bring in all these Russian guys and get them all playing. This was the Glenn Hanlon and Bruce Boudreau eras of the Caps, if I'm not mistaken. Do you guys have recollection of him playing for the Capitals? Again, I don't remember like a big thing that he left. I just remember being like, oh yeah, he's going to play with all the Russians in Washington now. But I did appreciate him on the way out, but do you guys have any recollection of him playing for the Capitals at all? He was only there for 2 seasons.
I don't have like a lot of recollection. I think he was on Ovechkin's line.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I can't really remember too much about it. I'm sure I don't remember off the top of my head, but I'm sure that he set up a goal for Ovechkin against us.
Almost definitely.
And I know from doing research, I think he had some of his better seasons there too, right? So
yes.
And like one of the stories you linked, Dan, as well, he was brought over there by Ovechkin and Alex Semin, so like it was a big
Alex
like
Semin.
Yeah,
totally
exactly.
forgot about him. Yeah. Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah.
But that's true.
I remember it because, like you said, he went with Pody and being like, God damn, like this team is breaking up. And this was, of course, like the Islanders struck out on Ryan Smith on July 1st, and they struck out on Drury and Gomez, which ended up, I guess, being good things. And then there was an exodus, like very quiet too. Like it was very hard to find NHL news that day. And I distinctly remember being at my aunt and uncle's house in Levittown on July 1st of that year, and like just refreshing their computer and people being like, what the hell are you doing over there? And I'm like, we just lost Ryan Smith. And they're like, who the fuck cares? It's like, it's beautiful out. Why don't you go in the pool? And I'm like, well, no, I can't. Like, how can I swim when Tom Pody and Viktor Kozlov are now in Washington? And I can remember Viktor Kozlov in the Capitals that like red jersey that they had just really started to wear right around this era. Because Ovechkin's first year was still the Screaming Eagle, and then I just remember Kozlov kind of looking, and maybe it's because he's Russian and it's very red, just being like that jersey looked good on him, and he was, like Steve said, like he was good for Washington, and they started to make the playoffs, right? They looks like he played 21 games with them in the postseason, so good for him on going out with the NHL with a bang, making the playoffs 3 years in a row, Islanders and actually 4 years in a row because the Devils had made it the year prior. So he was in the playoffs quite a bit. Never, I think he only got beyond the first round once in his career, which that sounds familiar for a lot of former Islanders. But yeah, it just, I wasn't mad at him for leaving, but I was just like, it was a really fun time. And like the analogy I made about the TV show ending, it just felt like that. Like, oh man, like I guess I'll always have the highlights and the memories, but I will miss it because he was just a fun player. And back then, like, you couldn't just tune into a Washington Capitals game to watch him, so you couldn't really like keep tabs on these guys anymore. And then he was done.
Yeah, but it was understandable. Like, I was sad that he left, I think, but he was just understandable again. That it was what the Caps were doing, and eventually it worked out for them. Like 15 years later, but and when it did work out for them, where was Viktor Kozlov? Well, he was coaching in the KHL. In fact, that's where he is right now. He coaches Salavat Yulev, and I gotta tell you, obviously I didn't know the guy very well. We've talked now for well over an hour. I've seen him go from bust for the Sharks to, pretty darn good player for the Panthers to an Islanders legend to, a guy on the Caps, in a sea full of guys. I can honestly tell you that I never expected this man to become a head coach. Like, I just didn't see it happening. Yeah. Some guys you look at, like, Mike and I famously talked about, all right, you know what, Thomas Hickey, when he retires, man, he's going to be on TV and he's going to be fantastic. And guess what? He has been. I never thought in a million years that I would ever see Viktor Kozlov as a coach, but apparently he's pretty good and he's been there a long time, and good for him. I think got the KHL page up here. He's got a bunch of decorated awards here and stuff. And so, that's good for him. I mean, he played over there for a while too. So, that's pretty impressive, but, he was been a head coach in a couple of spots. He was a head coach in Magnitogorsk as well. So, he won a Gagarin Cup as a coach in 2016 when he was an assistant coach for Magnitogorsk. So pretty wild. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I've watched these games, but that's pretty cool. So Steve, this was your pick. This was a fantastic pick. What are your final thoughts on Viktor Kozlov, one season Islanders legend, one game Islanders legend in a kind of a way, and a guy who, I know for him, that's got to be a highlight. I mean, he scores 4 goals in a game. That's pretty wild, but I can't imagine he's like, on a bench in Russia thinking, I wonder if 3 guys are sitting around talking about my 4-goal game at Madison Square Garden on a podcast right now. But to hear the name Viktor Kozlov, like what are the things that come to your mind?
Okay, so I have several thoughts here at the end. I will confess, I did not listen to a lot of Weird Islanders. I had stopped listening to Weird Islanders back in February, and I had already had a backlog. The last one I listened to was the Rob Shrimp episode, which I think was released a year prior. But I stopped listening for 2 reasons. And I wouldn't even say stopped. It was more so just like paused listening. Mm-hmm. One was that, for Lighthouse and just for my own edification, I was listening to other hockey podcasts, more newsy ones that, they're dealing with like current hockey events. And so I didn't want to, once they get old, then it's kind of it's not really useful to listen. And Weird Islanders episodes don't necessarily age. They can be listened to at any time.
Sure, of course.
But yeah, the newsier ones, that's why I like torture myself with the DFO rundown with Frank Saravalli and Jason Gregory. Baffling, by the way, that Tony D had to go to the KHL. Simply baffling. But 2, the other thing was this show and all your guys' show. I mean, I would listen to Islanders Anxiety as they would come out, because same thing, they were more current. But your guys' shows make me happy. It's a fun experience, and the Islanders were just playing like such assholes.
Yeah.
They were making me mad. And like, I didn't want to have a reminiscent fun experience with the Islanders. And then once the season ended, I was in the same mood of like, I'm so sick of these guys. I don't want to think of the Islanders for another 3 months. And so when you invited me back on again, I started listening to a bunch of them again. And I did catch up all the way. But it was fun. It was
It's impressive.
It was like I think it was 20 episodes in the last 2 weeks, but
Wow.
it was a lot of fun. And so it was like a time warp in two ways because each episode goes back in time, remembering the Weird Islander themselves, but also the random discussions that you and the guests would have. It would touch on things that were going on around that time. So I remember hearing about Lane Lambert, and then I remember I remember listening to when Playing Like Assholes even came to be. But I think my favorite was the Trevor Linden episode. It was there was a tangent about the O2 team where I think Mike was saying that Isles PR had done something nice for a change. They had taken the longest tenured 3 Islanders and made them the 3 stars in the clinching game against the Capitals.
Yes.
And that was a fun game.
Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he compared it to, this is like, I want to stress, this is 2022-23. So it's pre-Wah. It's still Lambert. Mike, I think you compared it to how well Montreal does ceremonies. And so I just found that very funny, knowing what came next when Wah finally came in. And then the third game was in Montreal, and Jeff Marek waxed poetic about how beautiful Montreal is. And you would think that Patrick Waugh was coaching the Canadiens or should have been coaching the Canadiens. So I thought that was cool. But to tie this all together, the other thing, a common topic was, what do these guys think their Islanders' legacy is?
Right.
And, Kozlov seems like the kind of guy that, were it not for that 4-goal game, I don't know if he'd remember he was an Islander. But because he did have that 4-goal game, I'm sure it does stick out. Like I'm pretty sure it was the only 4-goal game he had. And it was only the second hat trick of his career as well. So I'm sure it's, if nothing else, he remembers that. He maybe he doesn't remember what jersey he was wearing, but I'm sure he remembers that.
Well, he remembers he was at the Garden, that's for sure. And
he's like, I can't remember if I was with the Caps, the Panthers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
was it the Devils or the Sharks? No, it was the Islanders. I played for the Islanders.
But no, that's great. I mean, you're right. Like we talk about that because I mean, so many of these guys, they come and go, and I mean, I don't know what I do wonder like what his feelings are about playing for the Islanders and stuff. But I am impressed that you made it through that many Weird Islanders episodes in that short a period of time. So your dedication is unmatched and appreciated. And I mean, the idea of this show is not to be like, everybody's got to listen to it as soon as it comes out. Because I mean, God, we're talking about shit that happened 20 years ago. So it's like, we expect people to go back and listen to this when they can. But these sorts of memories, I think, are like you said. I mean, you remember making your brother cry because you were screaming so loud. Like that's a great memory to have. It's a fun one to have. And I mean, I keep asking people if they remember stuff, and I know that it's a ridiculous question, and I have to stop doing it because a lot of times you don't remember. But the stuff that you do remember is incredible. And this one guy has this one great season and this one great game, and it's like you just remember those little details that are so much fun, and that's what the show's all about. So that's pretty cool.
He only missed one game that season too. Like it's crazy that this team ended up being really reliable. Like if you just take a look at the stats page and Hockey Reference when you can, and you'll see like just if you covered up their names, you'd be like, oh, this is a pretty good team. You got a 40-goal scorer, a couple guys around like the 60-point mark, and this is back then in the kind of end the death throes of the dead puck era, but still scoring goals was really hard back then, and not many people were getting to a point per game at all, and no less scoring 35 plus. That's why Ovechkin was such a huge deal. It's like, wow, this guy's scoring like 40 goals a season. That's insane. But just like everybody played a lot. Like Witt did only miss one game. Sean Hill only missed a game. It's Kozlov missed a game. Blake Sillinger played 82. Park played 82. Shatan missed one. Hunter, Pody were both over 77 games played. So like it was just this weird, dependable team. And that's why like this, I think this team would be a hilarious group to like celebrate on like a 20th anniversary because of the nature of it, right? The transient nature of this team. So many guys were gone after after this year. When you go down the list, it's really strange how many just were here for just this 1 year. I mean, hell, they had Darren Quint for 4 games. They went overseas, and he was their second choice. Remember, like they tried to sign Todd Simpson, but he had a suspension in Germany, and the NHL was like, fuck it, we'll fuck the Islanders over and uphold a suspension from the German league. So they signed Darren Quint instead. This was just one of like the craziest, most bizarre rosters and teams, and we celebrate them a lot on the show, but for good reason, because of guys like Viktor Kozlov, who came, had an absolute blast. Like, and what a group for him to be around, because the only other Russian was Yashin. Like this was not a heavily Euro influenced team, right? They had Yashin and Kozlov as the only Russian. They had the Slovakian contingent with I guess Zednik, Shatan, and then Zednik for a little while, even though he didn't want to be there. Martinek, Czech, and I think that's it. Like everyone else was Canadian or American. If you look at this team, so it's a absolute bizarre team, and Kozlov fit. It doesn't make sense that Viktor Kozlov would fit in so seamlessly on a team like this. Like it doesn't. I can't imagine these guys sitting together, like almost any of them sitting together like before a game, being like, "Hey, you want to go get a bite at Zorn's before a game or something?" Like I just can't see it like these teams here, because they just barely knew one another and went on this crazy ride, ended up going into the playoffs for a little bit. Ryan Smith showed up in the middle of the year. Like what an insane season for these guys to be like they must have all thought I must have been tripping balls. It was a season where Simon hit Holwig over the head. Like what a like absolute like acid trip of a season for a lot of these guys. Like I can't we just at one point, one of my goals for the show is to get one of these guys on to talk about this team, and I know sometimes they go on Talking Isles and such, and that's a great listen, but in a show like this where we're not tied to the team at all, be like, how many guys on this team can you name? Because I don't know if any of them would be able to get past like 11.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, it was a wild team, and again, this was sort of the Mercenary Isles era, and again, would continue the next season, and then after that they would start the rebuild. So it's this weird sort of transient time, but they were capable of cool stuff, and this season really they were capable of cool stuff in this season. The next season didn't have a whole lot of cool stuff,
right? Yeah, that was the second season of the TV show, right? Yeah. Like that just was, the sequel was terrible. I mean, that one, it was like why I went into that year being like, oh, they could do it again. Like, no, what they did last year was almost like a 1 in a million shot of things that ended up happening. And of course they weren't gonna recapture any of the magic, and by magic I mean a first round exit in 5 games.
That's true. But it's like the second season of a TV show, but also like the band that comes out with the killer album first, and then you're like, oh man, these guys are the best, and then their second album is like, what the hell is this? And then they're done, and then they break up artistic differences or whatever. So yeah, that's that. But no, this was a fun trip back with a fun player and a game. I know we spent most of the time talking about one game, but it was definitely worth it. I hope you had fun, Steve. This was a great time. I mean, your first episode was great too, but I hope you had a lot of fun this time too.
Oh, absolutely. And, Filppula had some fun games, I think, and fun moments as an Islander, but he never had a 4-goal game.
No, he did not. That was a one-time thing reserved only for Viktor Kozlov. But thanks again for coming on, and thank you so much for everything you do for Lighthouse Hockey. I'm sure Dom tells you all the time, but what you do is great, and the place wouldn't run without you. So thank you for everything you've been doing all these years.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, take care. Mike, where can everybody find you on Twitter?
The Big Lebowski with 2 E's.
Follow Mike at the Big Lebowski. Become a member at patreon.com/IslandersAnxiety for ad-free episodes and bonus content, or join for free and get announcements and our weekly release calendar. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible.com, iHeartRadio, YouTube Music, and wherever you get your podcasts. And please leave us a review where you can. Our theme song is Knuckles by Bjorn Falk. Listen to more of Bjorn's music at Bandcamp and on Spotify. Read Lighthouse Hockey, of course, every single day. listen, use it's Steve's work. He's working hard out there. Read the show, read the pod. Let me say that again. Read Lighthouse Hockey every single day. Steve is working hard along with Dom and Jenny to bring that to you. So make sure that is where you get your most up-to-date Islanders news and discussion. Islanders Anxiety podcasts are part of the Fans First Sports Network. Learn more at fansfirstsports.com. Shop vintageIceHockey.com. Try wines from the Pinot Project. Mike, any final thoughts on Viktor Kozlov, one season Islanders legend?
You know, it's podcasts are hard to express imagery, I guess is the way to say it. But there are some players that leave you with like lasting moments from a performance in a game or a move or a goal. And then there's some that do, maybe it's a save or a mistake they made, a hit, a fight. For Viktor Kozlov, I think he's one of one. Whereas the first image that comes to my mind when you mentioned his name is that wry smile that he has on his face, curling off after scoring his fourth goal at the Garden, and just being like, this guy is in the middle of Madison Square Garden on what was supposed to be Brendan Shanahan, NHL royalties night, and here comes Viktor Kozlov stealing it, and he stole it with a smile on his face. And I mean, that's a beautiful thing, man. That smile is going to live with me for the rest of my life. So I've got nothing but good things to say about Viktor Kozlov. A flawless Islander career, bang for your buck. It doesn't get much better than what this guy did. A debt of gratitude to him for all the memories, and especially that one memory. And can't be said enough, but fuck Brendan Shanahan.
That's it. That's the perfect way to end it. Thanks for listening. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with a new Weird Islander. Until then, keep the Islanders weird and fuck Brendan Shanahan.
Fuck Brendan Shanahan. Always and forever.